Good day, hope you guys are doing all right. It's Dr. Tolu Ajibade here again with another video, a video which I've titled Laboratory Values, the tricks for easy memorization. So the reason I made this video is because I know that a couple of us find it really difficult knowing, getting numbers into our heads. You know, sometimes even our phone numbers, we get it very difficult. We find it very difficult to memorize. Talk less of unlimited values, several values in medicine while we study. I totally can relate with that, and I just want to make this video to help out and make sure it's easy for everyone to know these values. Because at the end of the day, it's not rocket science, it's just numbers, and numbers can be learned, okay? Anything can be learned. Okay, so in this video, we'll be looking at a couple groups of parameters and values to learn. We'll be looking at blood, complete blood count. We'll be looking at blood indices. We'll be looking at biochemical analysis. We'll be looking at acid-base values, all of that. And I hope you find it really interesting and educative. So without further ado, let's get into the video. All right, welcome back. Before we move on, I'd like to mention a few things, one of which is the fact that all values in this video are from Medscape, because I've come to realize that some of these values vary depending on the region or the country you're in. I was looking for a way to find a common ground for everyone all over the world to be able to learn these values, like an average for all of that. So we found some of the values from Medscape.com and a few other medical journals and medical websites, okay, renowned medical websites. And you should also know that no mnemonic here was intended to be depreciatory or derogatory of anyone. We didn't plan to offend anyone. We don't intend to offend anyone or making anyone feel less of themselves or feel bad. But the fact of the matter is, sometimes in learning, we have to use different tricks, different sentences, different mnemonics, different acronyms, and some people might find some of those offensive, but we didn't intend for that at all, okay? So we crave your indulgence. Just forgive us if you find that offensive, okay? And then there were a few tips that I would also want to mention here that we should note. For example, for this video, I would want us to not get overly stuck on the units, because all of these values have different varying units, and I would want us to just focus on the numbers for now. So in this video, we are working on numbers. How do you know these numbers? Not even the interpretation of the numbers, but just the numbers. Because I believe it all starts with the numbers. When you know the numbers and you add that to your basic knowledge of medicine, you will be able to know which is high, which is low, which is pathological, which is normal. You get what I'm saying? So let's focus on the numbers for this. And when you're unsure, if it's milligram per dl, for some of those values that are milligram per dl or millimole per dl, you could just look at, okay, which is the bigger number, which is the smaller number. The smaller number will always be the millimole per dl, because it has more weight, and the larger number will be the milligrams per dl. So you could always convert that by either dividing or multiplying by 18. I believe you all know this. So let's move on and get to the complete blood count, okay? We'll be looking at the fishbone, complete blood count fishbone. We'll be looking at the leukocytes. We'll be looking at RBC indices, okay? And then other blood values that find their way into this video. So talking about the fishbone, okay? What is a fishbone? As you can see, the fishbone is just an arrangement of these parameters, or arrangement of these values in a generic pattern that makes it easier for anyone to understand. So in a regular fishbone, in clinical practice, you just get a fishbone and you see these values on different points of the fishbone. So you should know which does this value represent and which does this other value represent. You understand what I'm saying? Because it won't be written there that this is white blood cell, this is hemoglobin. It's just going to be numbers. So you should know when you look at the fishbone. So this is the arrangement for the complete blood count fishbone. And as you can see on the far left, you can see the white blood cell. In the middle, you have the hemoglobin on top, hematocrit below, and then you have the platelets on the far right. Now, how do you remember this? When I saw this for the first time, what came to my mind was, okay, we have white on one side, we have hemoglobin, hematocrit, which are indices for red blood cells, We have that in the middle, so white, red, and then on the far right we have something platelets, which brings these things together, clotting, brings stuff together. So I thought white, red brings together. So I thought about it. I said white people and red Indians came together to form America. So white, red came together for platelets, red Indians for the hemoglobin, and then white blood cells represent white there. You understand what I'm saying? So that's a way I used in arranging this in my head. So no one should find this offensive, please. It's just for learning. Okay, thank you very much. Let's get to the basic values of the complete blood count. Okay, we've talked about the skeleton and all of that. Now to the values of the complete blood count. How do we remember this? Now you should know that some of these values are you just have to know, just about 2 or so in the whole video. You just have to know them. Okay, I would say maybe I should just confess that okay, I couldn't find a way to find a mnemonic or an acronym or a tip or trick for this particular parameter. So if anyone knows the tricks for any of these parameters, you could always put that in the comment below. We are always willing to learn from everyone. It's knowledge is vast and you can never overlearn anything. Okay, so if you know any of these values, you could put your own acronyms in the comment below, or if you have alternative ways of remembering these things, you could help us. Maybe it's even easier than the ones I have in this video. You could always put that in the comment below. We'll be looking forward to that. Thank you very much. So white blood cell is one of those values you just have to know. I learned white blood cell at just 4 to 10. You get to the power of 9 per liter. So how do I remember this? I don't know. I just know it. Okay, so 4 to 10 white blood cells. 4 to 10 white blood cells. Moving on to the next one here, which is hemoglobin. This one, I believe, is a universal way of remembering these values. We all know that women clock, for hemoglobin value, there's a different value for the men and there's a different value for women, okay? Or let's say male and females, not men and women, male and females. So we know female clock puberty between the ages of 12 and 15, while men actually mature a little later. So we have about 1 to 2 years gap there in maturity. So men would mature around 1 to 2 years plus 12 to 15 will be around 13 to 17. So that is the same way it works for the value. So the male hemoglobin is 12 to, what am I saying? The female hemoglobin, this was a typographical error, okay? So the female hemoglobin is 12 to 15 grams per DL, and the male is 13 to 17. You get what I'm saying? So that's how you remember that. Let's get to the hematocrit. We all know that hematocrit is 3 times the hemoglobin value. So when you see hemoglobin, you know hematocrit by multiplying that value by 3. When you know hematocrit, you know hemoglobin value by dividing by 3. I guess that's very simple. And then for the platelets, this is the second value you just have to know. The first one was what? The first one was white blood cell, which was 4 to 10. And this one is 150 to 400. That's platelets, 150 to 400. It's a large number, okay? It's a large number. There are loads of this in the human blood. So we have 150 to 400 to the power of 9 per liter, okay? So platelets and white blood cells, you just gotta know it. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on to other mnemonics, tips, tricks. Stay with me, all right? Stay with me. Now, you can see here, for leukocytes, when you see leukocytes, just imagine this monkey over here. Now, this monkey looks well-fed, doesn't look marasmic, doesn't look malnourished. So, yet this monkey is holding on to bananas. You shouldn't be eating too much, especially when you're doing well already. You don't have to be a glutton, okay? So what are we doing with this? So how does this relate to leukocytes? So when you see this picture, remember, never let monkeys eat bananas. This monkey shouldn't be eating more bananas. This monkey is doing fine. Look at the cheeks already, large, okay? So never let monkeys eat bananas. This denotes the arrangement of the leukocyte cells, okay? Now, of the leukocytes. So basically, never, that's the N there, represents neutrophils. The L represents lymphocytes, M monocytes, E eosinophils, B for basophils, okay? Now, it's arranged in descending order of quantity, okay? So how do you remember these values of neutrophils and all of that? Now, To remember the values, you should know that neutrophils are about half of the total white blood cells. Like I told you, they're on the top, neutrophils. Never let monkeys eat bananas. They're the first ones on the top of the list, which means the quantity is large, okay? So for neutrophils, the total white blood cells, remember, is 4 to 10, yeah? I told you, you just have to remember that. Now, half of that, let's say half of 4 is 2. The exact half of 4 to 10 would be 2 to 5, but for neutrophils, let's just say it is 2 to 8, okay? 2 to 8. That's half of the total white, about half of the total white, not exactly half. And then for lymphocytes, remember, lymphocytes is the next in line. Lymphocytes is about half. So the key number here is half. So when you remember half, you keep dividing by 2. So half of white blood cells, neutrophils, half of neutrophils, lymphocytes. Exactly half of neutrophils is lymphocytes. That's 2 to 8 divided by 2, you have 1, 2, 4. Now, what about monocytes, which is never let monkeys? Monkeys, monocytes. Now, how do we remember this? How do we remember this? Lymphocytes is 1 to 4. What is less than 1? It means when you go less than 1, you're getting into the decimals. So what's the top range of decimals? You have 0.8 downwards. So we have 0.2 to 0.8 is the value for monocytes. Now, how do you remember the 0.2 to 0.8? If you add 0.2 and 0.8, you have 1. If you look at the number 0.2 to 0.8, so sorry about the noise in the background. I'm recording it in the hospital, and there are a few people talking somewhere outside, okay? So 0.2 to 0.8 looks very similar to the first number there, which is that of neutrophils, which is 2 to 8. Remember, 2 to 8, half of 4 to 10. So 0.2 to 0.8, very similar to 2 to 8, values of neutrophils. And now for the eosinophils, that's the second to the last there. And what's less than 0.2 to 0.8? Let's look at that. That will be around 0.5, the average of that. So less than 0.5 is the value for eosinophils. How do you remember this? 1 divided by 2 is 0.5. Remember, for monocytes, 0.2 plus 0.8 gives you 1. So 1 divided by 2 is 0.5. So half of 1, 0.5. And then I thought about it. Why would monocytes be in a range? Why do they care so much to be in a range of 0.2 to 0.8 when I could just have the number 0.5 and put a less than? So less than 0.5. Why put it in a range when I can have it really simpler? Less than 0.5. Now for basophils, what could be less than 0.5? That's less than 0.1. You know, we can't say 0 for basophils, yeah? It can't be 0 because 0 seems really insignificant. 0 doesn't count, actually. So if it can't be 0, it can be 0.1, yeah? So less than 0.1, that's a tenth of 1. It's the least value here, less than 0.1. So let's take a recap of everything. We have neutrophils 2 to 8. Okay, total white blood cells 4 to 10. Neutrophils 2 to 8. Lymphocytes 1 to 4. Monocytes is what? Monocytes 0.2 to 0.8. And then you have never let monkeys eat eosinophils and basophils. Basophils less than 0.5, and then basophils for bananas is less than 0.1. I hope we all understand this. Moving on to the next thing. Remember, all of this is to the power of 9, so times 10 raised to the power 9 per liter. Now, mean corpuscular volume. What is mean corpuscular volume? Now, this denotes the average volume of red blood cells in a specimen. So what's the average volume of the red blood cells in a particular specimen given? Now, you should know that if it's talking about volume, it means a small cell will have a low MCV, a large cell will have a high MCV, a perfect cell, which is what we want, will have a perfect MCV. So if we're talking about perfection here, what is the most perfect number in the world? 100. 100 is the most perfect number in the world, and we must always keep it 100. Now, if you keep it 100, it means the normal value will be about 100. Now, let's put that in the range. Let's make it 80 to 100, okay? So moving on to the mean corpuscular hemoglobin, which is the average content of hemoglobin per red blood cell. The average content of hemoglobin per red blood cell. Now, how do we calculate this? For this, we have to do a little mathematics, which is really simple. If it's the average content of hemoglobin per red blood cell, we need to find that by doing hemoglobin value divided by the red blood cell count, and then multiply all of that by 10. So what's hemoglobin value? 15. That's like the average, okay? 15. What's the red blood cell count in millions of cells per microliter, okay? How do we calculate this? That's 5, yeah? RBC 5. 15 divided by 5, 3. 3 times 10, 30. Remember, you cannot just say 30 is the normal value. Because if you say 30 is the value, then you're leaving no leeway. So let's put it in a range. Let's put 30 in a range. So that will be around, minus 3 plus 3, that will be around 27 to 33, okay? So that's the normal value for mean corpuscular hemoglobin. Okay, moving on to the next one, which is mean corpuscular hemoglobin concentration. Now, this one is very similar to the previous one. The only difference is that it's the average content of hemoglobin per unit volume of RBC. That's hematocrit, not just the total red blood cells now. So per hematocrit, not per total red blood cells. So if you're looking at it from the previous idea, we can see that the formula here would be hemoglobin divided by hematocrit. Now, this will be times 100, not times 10 like the previous one. So 15 divided by 45. Remember what we said in the last, when we learned these values here. Average, 1545 times 100. That's 0.33 times 100. That's about 33 grams per DL. Now, let me see you put this in a range. Okay, let me see you put this in a range. If I'm to put it in a range, I will make it 30 to 35. 30 to 35 looks like a perfect range to me, okay? And looks beautiful to the eyes. 30 to 35, round figures. All right, moving on. We have the bleeding time. Bleeding time, basically, how do I remember this? I remember this because the value for bleeding time is 2 to 9 minutes is the normal bleeding time. So I thought, why did they skip 1 and why not more than 9? Now I just felt if I'm bleeding for 1 minute, yeah, I think everyone has bled for a minute before, and you just applied some pressure on it, and the bleeding stopped in about a minute. So if it's 1 minute, I believe it's nothing to be scared about. If it's minor bleeding, it's nothing to be scared about. So I just felt, 1 minute of bleeding doesn't really count. But now, when it becomes more than 9 minutes, then it becomes something, No one should bleed up for up to 10 minutes. If not, it becomes a cause for concern. So if 1 minute doesn't count, we are left with 2 to 9. Because 10 minutes, it's a problem, yeah? So 2 to 9 minutes, that's how I remember it, okay? Don't take this verbatim and say this is the explanation for bleeding time. No. What I just did is a way to remember it. So you have 2 to 9 minutes for normal bleeding time, okay? And then we have APTT, which is the activated partial thromboplastin time. Now, the normal value for this is 30 to 40. A lot of people actually remember this by using something. PTT looks like proper teaching time. It looks like an acronym for proper teaching time. Okay, so proper teaching time. Oh, I wrote normal here. That's a mistake, okay? The typographical error. So proper teaching time. When do you think is the best age to be a teacher? What age is like the optimal, the most appropriate age for teachers now? If you're less than 30, if you're in your 20s, then the students may not take you really serious. They may be looking at you like, he's almost my age mate, she's almost my age mate. Why should I respect you? Why should I be orderly? It could be difficult organizing the class. So I would say less than 20 isn't a good, less than 30 isn't a proper teaching time. And then when you're more than 40, then you become, your knowledge could be a little backdated, could be a little antiquated, Not saying this to demean any senior citizen who is a teacher or any elderly teacher, but we're just trying to remember this. Now, when you're above 40, you're losing your energy, you're losing your that drive there. So let's keep it in a safe zone of 30 to 40. Okay, everyone loves a teacher who is between 30 to 40. So proper teaching time. Partial thromboplastin time, activated partial thromboplastin time, 30 to 40 seconds. Now, not years now, but seconds as the real value. Now, you should also know there's something important to note. Now, if you look at the APTT, bringing the two T's together, it looks like H. When you bring two capital T's, two block letter T's together, it looks like H. Now, H here will stand for heparin. Now, when a person is on an anticoagulant like heparin, the activated partial thromboplastin time actually extends, so the time gets longer. How much longer? There are two capital T's in APTT. So two capital T's uh, means two times. So the value actually changes by about two times. So if it's about two times, we could call it 1.5 to 2 times. So heparin for capital TT comes together, looks like heparin, two T's, two times. You understand what I'm saying? So that's another important factor to note in case that comes out as a question somehow, or you see that in real life. Okay, thank you very much. Moving on. Prothrombin time. Prothrombin time. Okay, prothrombin time. So prothrombin time is PT. For me, PT sounds like pre-teen, pre-teenage. Okay, so when do you consider a person a pre-teenager? 10 years, of course. Teenage officially starts at the teen, the ages they start with that end with teen. So we have 13, 14. Now, but, you know, teenagers have a very funny behavior of feeling that a 13-year-old isn't really a teenager. Look, I'm 18, you're just 13, you're just 14. You're not acceptable as a teenager. Maybe when you get to 15, then we can call you a teenager. But between 10 and 14, you are pre-teen, pre-teen. So prothrombin time, pre-teen, 10 to 14 years, 10 to 14 seconds. Seconds, not years, please. Okay. Moving on. Let's move to something else, which is metabolic panel.